Welcome everyone to today's public meeting on Service Coordinator, Caseload Ratios. Today's presenter is Cesar Garcia, the Director of Client Services. Here is some background information about this public meeting. Each year, the Department of Developmental Services, DDS, sends information about Westside Service Coordinator to individual ratios. The report indicated that our Service Coordinator to individual ratios in March 2022 were higher than the ratios allowed in the Letterman Act. We will share the number shortly. The goal for this meeting is to share information about which of Westside Service Coordinator to individual ratios are too high, and why. Also, to get recommendations from the community about how to lower Westside Service Coordinator to individual ratios. You should expect Westside to create a plan of correction to meet the required ratios as indicated in the Letterman Act. This plan will include information from this public meeting, and recommendations from different stakeholders. First, and foremost, I would like to read aloud Westside's mission statement. It is WRC's mission to support people with developmental disabilities, their families, and communities of choice by facilitating access to person-centered, culturally responsive services and resources. Here is some information about Westside Regional Center. Westside is one of 21 regional centers in California. Westside is one of the 7 regional centers in the Los Angeles County area. We served a total of 10,091 individuals as of May 2022. We have 9,753 individuals with active cases. We have 338 individuals who are in the intake process to determine their eligibility for regional center services. We serve individuals in Malibu, Santa Monica, West Los Angeles, Culver City, Inglewood, Hawthorne, Lawndale, Gardena, and other cities not listed here on the slide. So, what is a caseload ratio? A caseload ratio helps us measure the number of individuals being served by our service coordinators. Westside's caseload ratios have been too high for several years now. This means, in some cases, too many individuals are sharing a single service coordinator.
So the operations budget is different than the purchase of service budget that each regional center is receiving. So there's that operations budget, and then we have our POS budget, which is our purchase of service budget that is utilized to purchase services and supports to everyone that is being supported by Westside Regional Center. Those budgets are kept separate and are never crossed. So the regional center operations budget is decided through a formula. And that formula for the operations budget is a tool that decides how much money DDS will give the regional center. And since each regional center has different operation needs, each regional center might need to use their operations budget differently. And of course, each regional center's operation budget will probably vary as well based on many different factors. So the core staffing formula, that is the tool that is actually used in order to determine how much money the regional centers are going to receive from DDS. Now, this formula is really an outdated budgeting tool that is being utilized to determine the dollars that the regional centers are going to receive. And the dollars are specifically dollars that include critical functioning positions like the service coordinators, our intake staff, our community services staff that support us and work with vendors, and other key positions as well. So this core staffing formula, unfortunately, has not been updated since the 1990s. And this is something that's been on everyone's radar for many, many years because of the fact that we know that this plays a significant role on, again, the money that the regional centers are receiving to operate. Now, the budget salary for service coordinators was last updated in 2001. Now, the intent was that, when that, budget salaries were updated for service coordinators, that the formula should have also been updated. but unfortunately, it's something that didn't happen, at that same time. So back in 2001, when the budgeted salaries for service coordinators was updated, it was basically right around $34,000, and it's remained frozen at that amount since 2001. Now, since then, obviously, things have changed, and the equivalent state salary has increased to approximately about $67,000. So as a result, really what it means is that, the formula that is currently being used, it underfunds the current needs that the regional center has. So we don't get enough money in order to specifically fund for the service coordinators and their salaries and benefits. So this is a report that the department provides every regional center based on the information that the regional center sends to them. And we do this typically at the beginning of the year, typically right around February. And this is when we did this. So in February, we sent over information to the Department of Developmental Services about all the individuals that we support here. And at the time, it was about 9,500 individuals that were supported here at Westside. We also provide them with information about how many service coordinator positions we have at that same specific time. So if you take a look at the very top section of this chart here, it really identifies the different categories of service coordination. And I'll go into specific details in a minute about that. The following line talks about, the required ratio based on the Letterman Act. So there's a specific, W&I Code, which is a welfare institution code embedded in the Letterman Act that specifically guides and dictates how many individuals should be served by one service coordinator at any time. And the next line below that, it talks about the number of individuals that were being served by Westside. So these are all the people that were being supported at Westside. As I mentioned, it's roughly about 9,500 individuals. And right below that, you'll see is the actual caseload ratios that Westside presented to DDS. And below that is the state average across all the regional centers throughout the state of California. So let's start off with the very first one here. And the other thing I want to point out is you'll notice that there's 3 shaded areas here, 3 categories that are shaded. So those 3 areas are where Westside Regional Center fell short, and we are not in compliance with, within the regulations. And I'll go into detail about each of those areas. So starting with the first one, it says here at the very top on waiver. And what that means is individuals at Westside Regional Center that are being supported who are on the Medicaid waiver program. So if you look at the what is required for a caseload ratio there, you'll see that we should have each service coordinator should have no more than 62 cases that they are supporting. And at the time of this report, Westside Regional Center was supporting almost 4,700 individuals that would fit this category, meaning that they were on the Medicaid waiver program that we have. So in taking a look at that, Westside Regional Center's ratio at the time was 1:79, meaning on average, a service coordinator had roughly about 79 cases on their caseload. Now, let me explain. This number is deceiving. And the reason why it's deceiving is because it doesn't paint an accurate picture, right? Because we know that there are certain service coordinators that are at 100 to 1 right now. They have 100 cases that are supporting, if not just a little bit over that. And the reason why that number is not reflected here is because of the way we have to run the report. I mentioned earlier that we look at the total number of individuals that are supported by Westside Regional Center at the time that we're running this report. And we also look at the number of service coordinators that we have. And essentially, to simplify it, we're dividing the number of service coordinators by the number of individuals that we have. And this is why we get this ratio or this average. But we all know that not each caseload is identical. I mentioned some folks have 100, some folks have 90, some folks have 80. So this is why you don't see that there. And the last number there, if you see, looking across all the other 20 regional centers, they are also averaging right around 179. So we're in a similar situation as other regional centers. Taking a look at the next category there, under 3 years of age. So this is specifically talking about our Early Start program, our babies. The caseload ratio there that's required again by law, it should also be 1:62. At the time that we did this report, we almost had 1,200 babies in our Early Start program. And that yielded a average or our ratios of 1:60. So we were in compliance there because it says that each service coordinator should have no more than 62. And if you notice that the state average is 1:65. The next three categories, I'm going to talk about them together. So you'll see here the term movers. What that represents, it's talking about individuals that at one time were residing in a state developmental center, which, we no longer have. Everyone has been moved out of these developmental centers and are now residing in our community, which is a great thing. So you'll notice that the very first category here says movers over 24 months. So meaning anyone that has moved out of the state developmental center and it's been more than 2 years. That caseload ratio should be at 1:62. And you'll notice here that at the time we only had 60. And our caseload ratio specifically for that category is 1:50. So we're below not only the state average, but what is required under the Letterman Act. Now, let me explain also. So we don't have caseloads that are just supporting individuals that have come out of the developmental center. So these individuals are embedded in other caseloads as well. So there could be a caseload where they're a service coordinator supporting someone who used to reside at a developmental center, but also someone who's on the waiver. And again, the actual ratio that WRC has here is not an accurate representation because of the possibility of having someone that fits more than one category on your caseload. But for the purposes of this report, DDS wants us to report specifically on those individuals that have moved out of the developmental center. You'll notice the one right next to it is looking at individuals that have moved between 12 and 24 months. So over the last 12 or 24 months, and that caseload ratio should be 1:45. So we don't have anyone there. We had 0, so it's not applicable to us. And the reason why is because Westside Regional Center made a huge effort on really focus on moving anyone that we were supporting that was residing in a state developmental center, years before the deadlines. So we really wanted to make sure that folks were no longer living in developmental centers and rather they were living in homes in our community. And the same thing for the next category. So anyone that has moved out of developmental center over the last 12 months, and that's at 0, the caseload there should be no more than 1:45 because of the amount of time that needs to be dedicated for those folks that had just moved out of a developmental center. But again, we have no one and because we moved folks out, pretty quickly. Okay, the next section, and it's shaded, and this is another area that we were not in compliance. And this is anyone over the age of 3 who's not on a waiver, who's not on the Medicaid waiver program. So you'll notice there that the Letterman required ratio is 1:66. And at the time, we were supporting just about 3,500 individuals here at Westside that fit that category. And this is where our largest, ratio stands at 1:85. And if you look at the case at the California average, 1:82. So we're not too far again from other regional centers in this particular area here. The next one is the complex needs. So this is a specialty caseload that the law requires no more than 25 individuals be supported by a service coordinator. And at the time, we did have 25 identified individuals that would be going into this caseload. But you'll notice that our ratios went to 14. So we had 14 individuals on that caseload, but we were transitioning others onto that caseload. And the state average is 1:23. So the last category is actually a fairly new category, along with the complex needs caseload. And you'll notice that this is the last one that is also shaded. And we were not in compliance there. So the last one here is low to no POS, meaning these are individuals that we are supporting here at Westside Regional Center that are using very low POS dollars, or in some cases have no POS dollars, or they're not utilizing any services at all. So the caseload ratio for these, for this category, you'll notice is 1:40. You'll notice that the number of identified individuals that Westside had was 0 there. So the reason it's 0 is not because we don't have anybody that fits that category. It's because we hadn't developed these caseloads when this report was completed. Therefore, you'll also notice that our ratio was NA because we didn't have any ratio to provide since we had not identified those individuals that would be going into these caseloads here. And this is something that we've done a lot of work on, since this report. So this is why it was shaded. We're out of compliance because we had not, identified individuals that would be going into these caseloads. So what do all those numbers mean? We just talked about where, what the average caseload ratio said we have, but I just talked about how, in actuality, the caseload that some service coordinators are carrying are much, much higher than that. So at this moment, Westside Regional Center receives funding for 122 service coordinators out of the 155 service coordinators that are needed in order to be in full compliance with every category of the caseload ratios. So that is the number of service coordinators that are needed as of February 2022, when that report was completed. And then this number is going to be a moving target. And the reason why it's going to be a moving target is because we will continue to grow here at Westside Regional Center. The number of individuals that we're supporting in the Early Start program or the Over 3 Letterman program. And just, a bit of information for everyone here. I mentioned that when we conducted this report, we were just about at 9,500 individuals that we were supporting. Now, since then, we've grown in just a matter of those few months. We ran the numbers, and basically we are now supporting 9,753 individuals. So we've grown as an agency by 252 individuals. And again, that's just, in a matter of a few months. The pandemic obviously affected our numbers, but as we are coming out of this pandemic, where this pandemic is looking differently, so are the number of intakes and individuals that we will be supporting in the future here. So I want to talk a little bit about the support that the regional centers have received in order to address the caseload ratio issue. Okay, so in fiscal year 2019-2020, there was a Senate Bill 81 that provided all the regional centers with additional money to create that 1 to 25 complex needs caseload that I talked about in that chart. And specifically, that caseload was meant to support individuals who were either at risk or who are residing in either an institution for mental disease, sometimes known as an IMD, or were residing in a community crisis home, or even a state-operated acute crisis home. So those individuals obviously require a lot more time to be able to really fully and thoroughly support the needs that they have, in particular when we are adding a mental health diagnosis. So there was that money to create that caseload to allow to specifically support those individuals. And this is above and beyond the regular, core staffing formula that was being used to fund regular service coordinator positions. So this was in addition, okay? And then the following fiscal year, 2021, 2022, the enacted budget at the time provided additional money to the regional centers to also hire, service coordinators to reduce service coordinator, the caseload ratios, specifically to 1 to 40, to address and reduce disparity. That is known as the enhanced service coordinator position. Westside Regional Center received 4 positions. And again, these 4 positions were in addition to the already existing 122 service coordinator positions I mentioned. So these caseloads are specifically going to be supporting individuals that we've identified here at Westside Regional Center who have little to no POS dollars. So the purpose will be to specifically provide information, education, and support to these families, find out, what the barriers are for individuals to access our services, if there are any barriers. And then the ultimate goal would be to, if it's appropriate and there's a need, to add services to the individual. And most recently, the governor's budget for fiscal year 22-23 is going to, or it will be including $61.8 million of funding to specifically address the caseload ratios that we've been talking about. And it's going to increase the number of service coordinators statewide by 921 service coordinators in order to help reduce those caseload ratios and, work towards compliance. Now, this funding here has been called, we may have heard of it as caseload ratio relief. Now, Westside Regional Center does not know how many service coordinators we will be receiving out of the 921 service coordinators that the $61.8 million will fund. Those will be going, across all 21 regional centers. We'll get a better idea, in the coming weeks as we, are moving into the end of this fiscal year, the number of new service coordinator positions that Westside will be receiving out of this, this funding here. So, in addition to that, what are the things that Westside has been doing to address the caseload ratios? I mentioned earlier the pandemic had really impacted us and our communities in different ways. Initially, it impacted our ability to interview and hire new service coordinators. But, Westside quickly adapted, and, we explored every possibility to make sure that we continued to either backfill or hire new service coordinators to make sure that we were, trying to bring in as many people to address caseloads. And as of January of this year alone, Westside has hired 10 service coordinators. So out of those 10, I will say that, some of those have been backfilled, meaning some service coordinators have left or they've been promoted and are now in other positions. So we had to backfill. But 4 of these 10 have been brand new positions. So we've added 4 new service coordinator positions, to address the caseload ratios. And we hope to continue to make sure that, we do everything that we can, and we're committed to bring in as many service coordinators as possible to lower caseloads, because it's not only going to do, it's not going to only allow us to come in compliance, but what it's going to really do, it's going to allow service coordinators to do what they what they're meant to do, right? To really be able to dedicate as much time as families need to them, to each of those families or each of those individuals. And service coordinators want to do that. That's why they got into this field, to help others. And lowering those caseloads will allow them to do that, to be able to really dedicate all the time that, someone may need. In addition to that, obviously, it's going to support families in our overall community, because they will be able to, get to spend the time that, they really need with service coordinators. I remember going back, 25 years ago when I was a service coordinator, and, the caseloads were a little bit different back then. I can tell you at any moment, who everyone was on my caseload. I can tell you each visit when I went to go visit a family, if they were cooking something on the stove and that smell was very vivid, or what was going on at their home at the time. I can recall specifically the stories that families would share with me, because I was able to spend that time and dedicate, myself to the needs that they have. And unfortunately, throughout the years, these caseload ratio issues have chipped away at that, because numbers continue to increase and increase and increase to the point where, service coordinators have to move on from one family to the next to the next. Obviously, we do what we need to do, but I can tell you that service coordinators would definitely want to do things differently. So that being said, Westside wants to hear from you. We want to hear your recommendations. We want to hear any input, anything that you would like for us to consider as we look at addressing, the caseload ratios. What's going to happen is I'm going to go ahead and collect all the input that is being provided, all the feedback from today, but not only today. There's some folks that may have not been able to join us, but they'll be able to watch this, recorded. And, they'll be able to, send feedback via the email that I have here, caseload ratio feedback, or send a fax, or even just, good old fashioned U.S. Postal Services. Send me a letter, a note, addressed to not just, directed to me as a director of client services, but make sure you indicate attention caseload ratio feedback. And all this information, we'll go ahead and consider it, and it'll be part potentially of our corrective action plan that Westside's going to put together and send over to the Department of Developmental Services, letting them know, what we're proposing to do to address those specific areas that, we're out of compliance in, with the caseload ratios. Now, I will need information no later than June 25th in order for us to really consider anything that is being shared with us, besides the information we're going to get tonight, obviously. So at this point, please feel free to, share any comments, any feedback, raise your hand, and, we'll definitely, call on you if you have anything you'd like to, share with us or any suggestions.
Hi.
Hi,
Go ahead,
Elizabeth.
Hi.
Hi, Elizabeth.
I wanted to let you know, because of what's happening with the regional center, I haven't heard anything from my service coordinator. Her name is Brenda Starling. I haven't heard anything from her in quite a long time. I'm just wondering. I don't know what's going on. I'm wondering if she got promoted or if she went on some kind of leave of absence, because I am aware that sometimes service coordinators sometimes take time off, especially because of this pandemic. They're probably spending more time with their families, because for health reasons. So that I get and I understand that, but I'm just wondering, well, I haven't heard anything from my service coordinator in a very long time. The last time I talked to her was in an IPP meeting I had on Zoom, and that was October of last year. So ever since then, I haven't heard anything from her. And the other thing too, I'll be switching coordinators. I'm going to have my husband's service coordinator. Her name is Ezra Khan. I think she's still with the regional center. So I'll be switching over to her, and hopefully things will start happening. Because I'm also because of the pandemic, I haven't been working. And before the pandemic, I was working for Goodwill. And that's what I'm trying to get back to, but, I haven't heard anything from
Okay.
Brenda,
So, Elizabeth, thank you so much for your comment. We're making a note of that, and we'll definitely be reaching out to Brenda and let her know so that she can reach out to you. Okay.
Yeah, but I also want it clear that I'll be switching over to Ezra Khan. That's my husband's service coordinator.
Sure, we can. Hi, we can definitely, make sure that someone reaches out to you so that you can have that conversation with them. All right, Elizabeth?
Sounds good.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Caesar, we also have Lisa and then 2 comments in the chat from Patty.
Okay. Hey, Lisa.
Oh, you're muted there, Lisa.
Tina. My phone is overheated.
We can hear you just fine, Lisa.
Sometimes I call my service coordinator, and sometimes she doesn't actually return my phone call in a timely manner. And I guess sometimes the only time that when she every time when she every time when she actually responds to my phone call, when she actually responds to my or the returns my phone call is when I switch into actually change my service coordinators.
Lisa,
And that's when she the returns my phone calls.
okay.
And sometimes I'm not sure if she's doing better or worse.
All right.
And she was in the replacement of the Bridget, which I'm not sure what to say about her, but I don't know exactly what happened to her, and she did a few things that what she wasn't supposed to be doing. Because she decided to actually when I had an IPP meeting at the regional center, she decided to actually invite the crisis person to come in the meeting without my knowledge, and she actually asked and I had an issue at work at the Goodwill and sometimes it felt like that she was negative about it. And one time when things were going well, I actually asked for assistance to actually find a new job, and she didn't actually bother helping me to get a new agency until after we had a different job coach, which gave me trouble, and she's actually blaming me. She's actually blaming me, saying that what's right from wrong. That's why you got suspended from this job.
So Lisa, you know what? I want to thank you for your comment. I'll definitely make sure that we took down all this information. I'll make sure that your service coordinator gets it, so that they can reach back out to you tomorrow. Okay.
Good. And I haven't tried to call my service coordinator for a while.
Yeah, I'll make sure that they reach out to you, so that they can address what you're saying today. Okay.
Good.
All right. Thank you, Lisa. And I did see that we did have the comment that Patty writes, why aren't we adjusting the funding formula for salaries based on 2022 instead of 2001? It's a great question, Patty. And unfortunately, it all goes back to, the core staffing formula that needs to be updated so that it can bring us to current times, and making sure that we are able to fully fund, for service coordinators. And that's something that, again, is being done. I know that it's been in the limelight for years now. And I think, this is really now tracking attention from various legislators. They're actually listening, not just to the regional centers, but to ARCA. And we're hopeful that the core staffing formula will be updated, as well as the state salaries. And in the near future, all that will be able to fully fund the regional centers.
Caesar, we also have a question from Paul. Paul asks, is the funding that the government is providing only to increase the number of SCs, or will that be applied to salaries? I suspect that there is a direct correlation with competitive salaries and SC retention.
Right. So they're trying to do both, right? They're trying to update not just the core staffing formula, that again, it funds the regional center and the service coordinator salary. So definitely they want to adjust, what that state, employee salary is. So again, they were supposed to do both, make both adjustments back in 2001, but unfortunately that didn't happen. So the hope is that both will be adjusted, because they both need to be adjusted, and it'll definitely make a difference in how the regional centers are funded, and ultimately staff. Okay.
And Patricia also did add 2 more comments underneath. Do you want to read them out for you, or can you see them?
Sure, I can see them. I'll read them out. Okay, thanks. So how do we light a fire under them so I can get it moved along? Patty, I'm going to send you to Sacramento.
I'll go. I will go. When? When?
You know what? There's definitely a lot of opportunities, right? The most recent one was Grassroots Day, right? Where we definitely collectively as a system, the regional center had representation there of not only, families, but staff, people that we support, self-advocates, to be able to, have their voices heard and let, lawmakers, legislators, all these folks hear what's it like in the ground, right? In the trenches. And, what kind of reform the system really needs. And that's just one of the opportunities. The other thing is, Patty, I think you'd be great also to join our legislative committee here. That's open to anyone, whether you are an employee or anyone from our community. We always definitely talk about what are the things that we can do, write letters to our local politicians, right? Meet with them, coordinate our efforts with other regional centers, with ARCA, all these different things that we can continue to do. I think there's a lot of really good momentum right now that, has gotten that fire started. And we hope that we're able to, continue to see changes within our system so that our system, gets the funding that it really needs to be able to do everything that, we all want to do.
Thank you. I'd love to know more about all of that stuff. Also the grassroots thing. I don't know how I missed that, but yeah, because we can sit here and complain, but we really need to start taking action and kind of showing them what it's like down in the trenches. And you know how hard we work.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be more than happy to, talk with you and expand on this information.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't know we had a legislative team. Is that what that is?
It's a committee.
Committee. Can you explain what it does?
Yeah. Basically we look at, within the committee, again, we talk about all the different things that we can do to advocate for the system, but also all the different things that are going on, all the different bills that potentially will impact, good or bad, our system, right? And we talk about, what are some of the things that we can do in order to continue to advocate for our system, on behalf of our system. And again, partner with other stakeholders that, have the same interests, like our vendors, right? So they do a lot of those things, and they do a lot of advocacy, and they potentially, are kind of the driving force, in, letter writing to our local politicians, or even, being part events like, grassroots that I just talked about. So those are all some of the things that committee does.
Next,
sorry. I was just listening to. I just had another thought, and I just lost it because I was reading a chat, and I have ADD issues. So, I'll come back to you with that question. Sorry. Thank you, Caesar.
Sure, no problem, Patty. And then real quick, Paul asked if in fact, that would be an option, travel to Sacramento. So back in the days, we used to do that pre-pandemic, right? That's something that potentially we could do on very specific, events and opportunities. Right now, the Capitol is not completely open. Like, for example, Grassroots was still primarily just, Grassroots Day was all virtual still. In the past, that would be an event that would be in person up in Sacramento for sure.
I just remembered what I was going to say. And I don't know if it could even be helpful, but in the light of the fact that the state of California is projecting almost $98 billion in surplus, is there any way for regional centers to be able to tap into some of that?
There is a lot of advocacy going around on that. Everyone's trying to obviously get a piece of that pie. There's a lot of things that will factor into that, especially the way the economy is right now, and the different recommendations that the different legislators will be making as far as how to, what to do with that surplus. Whether, let's use it, let's fund other things, or do we really need to keep that there because of what may be coming down the line, and making sure that we have funds in the event that we do go into some kind of small recession again.
Got it. Thank you so much.
And then, Patty, and for anyone else is interested, I see that Jane here did put in the chat that our Political Action Committee meets every second Tuesday of the month at 5 p.m. And right now, all those meetings are in Zoom.
Okay, next we have a question from Stephen Browning. Where is it?
It actually wasn't a question, it was just a comment, and I need to give Rhiannon Maycumber credit for this. As one of the results of Grassroots Day is that Senator Bradford actually authored a letter of support for the core staffing formula. I just wanted to mention that since we were talking about Grassroots Day, and that was something really good that came out of that.
That's awesome, Stephen. It's Patty. That's awesome to hear. Hopefully it'll go somewhere.
Yeah. Again, I give full credit to Rhiannon because she worked tirelessly on Grassroots Day.
Good job to Rhiannon too. I don't know if she's on this, but thank you for that update.
Yeah, it was a great letter. I'll share with everybody. Okay. Any other comments, recommendations?
Yeah, I do have a comment. As far as the meeting, I received the notice today. So I guess there probably, I presume, might have been another notice before today. Because I got it like maybe 15 minutes before. But since this is a profoundly important topic for the entire agency and all of the employees, in the future, when we have this type of meeting, can we have like notice maybe a week or two in advance so that we can have more of a larger number? Because you see, it's only 31 people, and I know it's like after like work, but it's like super important.
Right, Paul. We did do this. As you mentioned, we did provide a notice, but it was previously posted. I did talk about it at client services as well. I don't know if you remember if you were there.
No, I wasn't.
So yeah. But point well taken. It was definitely on our website, and we posted on social media as well. But we will continue our efforts to make sure that we get information like this out, and at every opportunity to make sure that our community is definitely aware of any of these public meetings. Okay, well, I want to thank everyone once again, for taking time out of your afternoon, early evening to be here to listen to the presentation and all the comments that were made. Really appreciate that. And I bid you a good evening. And thanks so much again. Take care, everybody.